this last dream that I had, it was December 12th. And for me, it was just a major encouragement as we have been, praying for and contending that, Lord, we need to see this corruption and all this stuff dealt with. When is justice going to be served? Because the more that comes out, it's like, okay, people are seeing it, but is anything ever going to be done? We hear things, in different channels, and different ones, suggest things. We get hearsay, rumors, but it's like, we don't know exactly what's happening or why it's happening. And so this dream just really, I felt, was the Lord's assurance that he knows and that he's going to deal with it. So basically, in the dream, it was my husband and I, Bobby. And I know, by the way, that whenever it's Bobby and I in a dream, it does represent the church because he's a pastor. And we were there together. We were being led, blindfolded and handcuffed, into a processing room with two national leaders. And I'm not going to say who they were because it's not important. It's more important what they represented. And you'll find out here in a minute what it is. But it was a processing room, kind of like what you'd see at an airport, because it was just very plain. It wasn't a courtroom. It was just plain, but it was a lot. You could tell a lot of Secret Service detail. I could tell this is a strategic, high level thing that we're doing, because I knew that we were being led into here and that we were going to be asked one question. And depending upon that question, it was life or death. It was heavyweight. It was serious. And yet, Bobby and I, we were blindfolded and handcuffed. And I could just feel the energy around us and watching this. And all I know is that in the dream, the question must have been asked. I don't know what it was, but I heard one of those leaders fall to the ground. Whoa. Very distinctly. And a moment later, I heard the second one fall. And then the next thing I know, our blindfolds are coming off and someone is undoing our handcuffs. And I'm realizing, even in the dream, as my eyes are now adjusting and I'm seeing things, I'm realizing I am in the midst of history in the making. Wow. Because I realized the seriousness of this moment and who is in that room. And so I'm wanting to see for myself, and I peer over the shoulder of someone and I can see these two leaders. I see what happened with my own eyes. And in the dream, I'm just caught, like, I finally see it. I can see for myself now, the consequence, because it really was a form of judgment.
Now, to be clear, when they fell to the ground dead, Wanda? That
was the impression. Okay. I knew that they were gone, that there was the consequence of their answer, that they had been dealt with.
Okay, wow.
And so the next thing that I know is, as we're exiting this room, there's a doctor that is now taking our vital signs and checking us. And as the doctor began to check me, the very first thing he checked was my heart. He wanted to know what my heart rate was. And even as he began to check my heart rate, all of a sudden I remembered that previous to this experience, I had incurred a lot of other wounds and I'd forgotten about them. But all of a sudden it came flooding back to my mind of these other wounds that had happened, especially to my feet, that they had really been wounded. But in the light of that moment, I wasn't worried about it. I knew that they would be healed and I was going to be okay, because my heart rate was normal. My temperature, I was afraid it was going to be too high, but it was normal. So I exit the room, and the last thing in this dream, I was led into this huge hallway with hundreds of people. And there was so much chatter and so much commotion because of what had just transpired. Everyone was talking, and there was a speaker that was trying to get everyone's attention, but it was hard to hear because of all the chatter. And that's how I woke up.
Wow.
And so the initial message that I felt that the Lord was saying, because emotionally what I felt in the dream was everything that I could only hear. I'd been blindfolded, and this is what I feel like, spiritually speaking, this is a picture of how many of us have felt in the last whole year. Mm-hmm. We can't see. We have been blindfolded, by mainstream media, by powers that be, that we can't see things. We feel handcuffed by the endless restrictions and mandates to even do anything. But yet in the dream, there came a point where I saw for myself. It wasn't secondhand information. I saw for myself, and I felt like that was the word of the Lord, that he was saying, your eyes will see what your ears have only heard. So all these things that we're wondering about, we're questioning, I believe there's coming a point where the eyewitness proof and evidence is going to be so clear, it will settle doubts. If we're still anxious about, Lord, is truth really going to be revealed? Are we really going to know? I feel like the Lord is saying, yes, you will. I don't know how much, but enough that will settle the doubts, and it really will bring us together. So that was the most important message that I felt. It wasn't even about who the leaders were. I mean, it represented the worst of the worst. Let's just say that God knows, okay? But then the next thing, this doctor who checked my heart, I felt like it was a picture of heaven's priorities, that our heart condition is the first and foremost. That's what's most critical through this whole thing, is our heart condition. Are we aligned with the Lord? Do we know his heartbeat? And the fact that I had even incurred other wounds. I mean, this last year, talk about battle scars, the spiritual warfare, and even, physical loss. I mean, loss of life. There's been people that have been wounded. I mean, we have been in a war. But I felt like what the Lord was showing was that there is going to be a grace. And there is a grace. I think there's a grace on us even right now that we don't realize. I think in days to come, we're going to realize how much grace is on us to be able to weather what we've been weathering. But the Lord is saying, pay attention to your heart. Make sure that your heart is in sync with me, that your heart is in tune with me. And then going out, into this this room. Actually, I forgot to say in the dream, Bobby and I had gotten separated somehow in the midst of exiting this processing time, which I knew that's why it was a processing room, because this is a process we're going through. But we had gotten disconnected. And I felt like the Lord's admonition was how important it is we've got to stay connected in this process. We can't lose each other, because this is something that is impacting all of us at various degrees in various ways, but we've got to stick together. And even in that last, scene, to me, that really signals the beginning of another whole journey that's going to be good, that's going to be for our edification, for the maturing of the saints. And it's been said before, and I just want to put an exclamation point, that when these revelations do come, it is going to serve to bring believers together, non-believers into the kingdom, because truth will be seen. And so that really was the heart. I know, ElijahClips, you posted the word, here a couple of days ago, but I just wanted to, share that.
And Wanda, just for clarification on that too, because you're saying it doesn't matter who the people were, but you talk about national leaders. Is this word solely for the national leaders thing, where our eyes will be open, and that, or is there anything for the church in that too?
I'm glad you mentioned that. No, that the very fact that Bobby and I were blindfolded, because I put it in my written word. This is a test that we're going through, but it's not just a test for national politicians or whoever. The church is being tested too. We all are. We are all going through this process together. So no, it wasn't just looking at what's going to happen to others. We're going to be tested ourselves. Now, in the dream, I had a peace. I had assurance. I wasn't fearful, because I knew that our hearts were clear. And so that's getting back to the heart condition, that if we have a clear conscience, that we know that we're right with the Lord, we're right with one another, then we can have that assurance that, God's with us and we're going to make it through. But this is, I felt like, and I think it was in the written word too, we're all being tested in where we stand, who we stand with, because that was really probably a picture of heaven's courts. It's not just the national courts, it's heaven's courts, that we're all having to stand before a righteous judge. Do we stand for truth? And who are we going to believe, and for the right reasons, and for the right purpose? And are we going to, stay together in it? So that was really the gist of the dream, which leads then really into the heart of what I wanted to share, because of how that dream ended, of how important it is that we go through this together, because of the differences of the prophets and where we're headed. Because a part of the prophetic revelation is we want to know not only what's happening now, but where is this all going? Okay. And so this, as I sought the Lord, and this was several weeks ago, that the Lord, I was trying to figure out too, Lord, what are you doing? And this is when he highlighted, there's a difference between having a revelation and having an interpretation of that revelation, and then even applying that revelation. And this is some of what I teach in dream interpretation. When you have a dream, you have the initial revelation, and that's what I call the raw data. That's that dream you have, that vision, that initial unction of the Spirit. That's the revelation of the Lord. But then it needs interpreting oftentimes, especially if it's highly symbolic, then you really need an interpretation. But we've maybe assumed that if you have the revelation, you're automatically going to have the interpretation. Yeah. But that's not always true. Mm. And I think what's happened is that we have kind of gone to this default mode that if we have that revelation, we should have the interpretation, and we quickly go there. Mm. And then oftentimes that's what we end up presenting is the interpretation rather than the revelation. And I can see where this is where some of the differences have been. It does not disqualify the initial revelation, because I know some of these questions, and probably more from the detractors of prophetic, ministry that would like to disqualify the prophetic word. It's understanding, the revelation is most of the time, it is pure, it is there. But we do have a responsibility of stewarding that. How are we going to interpret this? And that responsibility rests both on the prophet, but also on the listener, in terms of how are we going to steward that revelation? Are we all seeking the Lord together as to what that means, in terms of what the Lord has in mind?